Mr. Guzman, for those who don't know, goes by the name of El Chapo. He was, what still is, he was and is one of the world's most notorious criminals. He ran the Sinaloa drug cartel, which was the biggest drugs cartel in Mexico, the number one supplier of narcotics across the United States. There wasn't a city in the United States that the Sinaloa weren't penetrating. Repeatedly named by the DEA and CIA as an FBI. I mean, all the agencies were lining up to say that Sinaloa is the most dangerous criminal organization in the world. He was called El Chapo, which means shorty in English, because he's 5'6" tall. He is a fearsome individual. He quickly acquired a reputation. He left school, I think, about 15. He grew up as a peasant in northern Mexico, in the Sinaloa, the area called Sinaloa, where the main cash crop, in theory, it's maize and ordinary avocados and beans. In fact, the main cash crop is marijuana for the United States, and he not only showed an incredible ruthlessness where he was prepared to kill himself, but he also showed a fantastic, and I give credit where it's due. I mean, it sounds weird, I'm applauding a drugs baron, but an astonishing prowess at organization and logistics. And he rose up through the ranks of the cartel and eventually became the boss of the Sinaloa cartel. And his attention to detail, his fastidiousness, his ability to be running. We are not talking about a guy with a couple of cannabis plants in his loft. This is a guy who was supplying tons and tons of marijuana, heroin, crystal meth, you name it. Whatever America wanted, Chapo, in terms of narcotics, Chapo supplied. And often using Arctics, giant trucks, even submarines, aircraft. He had a fleet of about, I think it was 13 aircraft at one stage, and employing actually thousands of people. I mean, we all think of the people who carry guns and kill people, but again, they're called the sicarios, the killers, but they're a small number. The main body of people are the growers, the farmers, the drivers, the smugglers. So a huge exercise.
What I'd love for you to do is, since you've just described El Chapo so colorfully with the murderous and efficient operator who is supplying very lethally addictive drugs to the United States of America, let's contrast the head of that business with the head of HSBC, one Stephen Green.
Yeah, I mean, what this book is about our obsession as a society with the pursuit of big. And here you had a guy who wanted his drugs cartel to be the biggest in the world. And you also had a guy running a bank that wanted his bank to be the biggest in the world. And the guy running the bank, rather perversely, was called Stephen Green, English. Originally worked at McKinsey, but he was famous in banking for being something quite rare, which is he's an ordained priest. He espouses ethical capitalism, writes books about it, or has written books about it, and to the rest of the world. I mean, there's a line in the book saying that his colleagues would notice that he wrote his sermons on business flights. So to the world, he was this holier than thou banker. I mean, his nickname in the city was God's Banker in London. And that, you know, that there aren't many people in banking, certainly in those days, and we're talking 20 years ago. There were not many people then who were in London anyway. Very few who were out Christians. I mean, there were obviously plenty of people who were Christians, who went to church, and you know, were quite religious in their beliefs.
But he led with his Christianity.
Yes, he did, and he was very out there. He was always making speeches about capitalism, but he also harbored this ambition, and his ambition was for HSBC to become the biggest bank in the world. And so you've really got these two contrasting figures. But what they both have, as well as ambition, is they're very good business people. You know, they seriously are. They're not. These are two people who've got to the very top in their. I don't know if you can call Chapo's a profession, but he's got to the very top. Green had got to the very top, and in parallel, they set out to turn their own organizations into the very biggest. Chapo had a big problem, which we alluded to earlier, which is he's selling drugs all the way across the United States. And we are talking, you know, the volumes are colossal. And he's receiving grubby dollar bills from people that are buying drugs on the street. Chapo had all this money, tons and tons of it. So his solution was to smuggle it back down the same lines that he'd used to get the drugs in. He took it back into Mexico, where to his immense satisfaction, he discovered that this funny bank in his area was now part of a much bigger bank, an international network, and they weren't pursuing any controls. Contrary to what HSBC had told the Mexicans, they really took their eye off the ball and they were not bothered. And so he was really literally pushing at an open bank counter. I mean, the record deposit in one day, and I just ask you and people watching and listening to imagine this. You're in a bank and the guy in front of you in the queue, he deposits $933,000 in cash. Now, I've got a very short. It's just an alarms did not go off. This is the point. This is the difference between HSBC in Mexico and a bank in North America, the United States. The United States, all hell would have broken loose. You go into a bank with $933,000 in cash. You're not going to get out of that bank. You're going to be arrested there and then, and you'll be asked to.